The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the small suburban neighborhood where the Bennett family lived. The leaves of the large oak tree in their front yard shimmered with shades of orange and red, the vibrant colors of autumn. Inside the house, however, there was no joy, no beauty in the changing season. The warmth of the evening stood in sharp contrast to the icy chill that had gripped the family's hearts. Monica Bennett sat on the living room floor with her knees drawn up to her chest, her eyes fixed on Max, their loyal golden retriever. His once lustrous coat had dulled, his movements slowed to a near halt. He lay on a blanket beside her, breathing shallowly. Monica ran her fingers gently through his fur, her heart aching with every labored breath he took. He had been with them for 9 years, 9 beautiful, unforgettable years. But now, it seemed, their time together was drawing to a close. Nearby, Jared Bennett leaned against the doorframe, his strong arms crossed over his chest. His jaw was tight, his face a mask of pain he refused to show openly. Jared was the rock of the family, the one who always knew what to do, but this was beyond him. Watching Max deteriorate had been like watching a part of himself wither away. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our upcoming stories. 4-year-old Ava sat cross-legged beside Max, her small hands resting on his back. She didn't fully understand what was happening, only that her best friend, her constant companion, was no longer the playful dog she had known. "Why won't Max chase the ball anymore, Mommy?" she asked, her wide brown eyes filled with confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" Monica's throat tightened. She reached out to stroke Ava's hair. "No, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "Max is just very tired. He's been so strong for so long, but now his body needs to rest." Ava frowned, her little brows knitting together. "But he can rest here, right? With us." Monica couldn't find the words to answer her daughter. How could she explain that Max's rest might mean saying goodbye forever? She looked at Jared, silently pleading for help, but he simply shook his head and turned away, his shoulders stiff with unspoken grief. The decision to take Max to the vet had been a difficult one, made after weeks of sleepless nights and tearful discussions. Max's condition had worsened rapidly in recent months. What had started as occasional fatigue had progressed to severe lethargy, loss of appetite, and visible weight loss. The vet had run countless tests, but the results were inconclusive. All they knew was that Max was in pain, and no amount of medication seemed to help. The final straw had come that morning when Max had struggled to stand, his legs trembling beneath him. He had looked up at Monica with eyes that seemed to say, "I'm tired. I can't do this anymore." It was then that she and Jared had agreed to make the call. Now, as they prepared to leave for the vet's office, the weight of their decision pressed down on them like a physical force. Ava refused to leave Max's side, clutching his collar as if letting go would mean losing him forever. "Please, Mommy," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't take Max away." Tears streamed down Monica's face as she knelt beside her daughter. "Oh, baby," she whispered, "we're not taking Max away. We're just going to help him feel better. Dr. Wilson will take care of him, just like he always does." "But what if he doesn't come back?" Ava asked, her voice barely audible. Monica couldn't answer. Instead, she wrapped her arms around Ava and held her close, both of them crying softly. The drive to the veterinary clinic was somber and silent. Max lay in the back seat, his head resting on Ava's lap. She stroked his fur gently, whispering words of comfort. "It's okay, Max," she said. "You're the best dog ever. I love you so much." Jared kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Monica sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap. She stared out the window, watching the world pass by in a blur. It felt surreal, as if they were trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. When they arrived at the clinic, Dr. Wilson was waiting for them. He greeted them with a warm smile, but his eyes were filled with sympathy. He had been their family vet for over a decade and had known Max since he was a rambunctious puppy. "Come on in," he said gently. "Let's see how Max is doing." They followed him into the examination room, where a soft blanket had been laid out on the table. Monica lifted Max carefully, cradling him in her arms as if he were a child. She placed him on the table, her hands lingering on his back for a moment before stepping back. Dr. Wilson began his examination, his movements slow and deliberate. He checked Max's pulse, his reflexes, and his breathing. He felt along his abdomen and examined his eyes and ears. All the while, he spoke in soothing tones, both to Max and the family. "You've done everything you can for him," he said. "He's had a wonderful life because of you." Monica nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jared stood silently, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Ava sat on a stool in the corner, her eyes never leaving Max. Finally, Dr. Wilson stepped back and sighed. "I know this is an incredibly difficult decision," he said. "Max has been a fighter, but his body is telling us it's time. If you're ready, we can help him pass peacefully." Monica's knees buckled, and she grabbed the edge of the table for support. Jared reached out to steady her, his expression unreadable. Ava's voice broke the silence. "What does that mean? Is Max going to sleep?" Dr. Wilson knelt down in front of Ava, his face kind but serious. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "Max is going to a very special place where he won't feel sick or tired anymore. He'll be happy and free." Ava shook her head, her curls bouncing. "But I don't want him to go. I want him to stay here with me." Monica pulled Ava into her arms, both of them sobbing. Jared turned away, his shoulders heaving as he fought to keep his composure. Dr. Wilson waited patiently, giving them as much time as they needed. Just as he was about to administer the injection, Max stirred. His head lifted slightly, and his tail gave a faint wag. His eyes met Ava's, and for a moment it was as if he were telling her, "I'm still here." Dr. Wilson paused, his brow furrowing. "Hold on," he said, setting the syringe down. "I want to check something." "What is it?" Jared asked, his voice sharp with both hope and frustration. Dr. Wilson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began examining Max again, this time with a renewed focus. He ran his hands along Max's body, pressed gently on his joints, and listened to his heart and lungs. Finally, he straightened and looked at the family. "I'd like to run some additional tests," he said. "I know we've been down this road before, but something isn't adding up." Max's response, "Just now it doesn't match the progression of a degenerative disease." Monica's eyes widened. "Are you saying there's a chance he might not be dying?" Dr. Wilson held up a hand. "I'm not making any promises, but I've been doing this for a long time, and I trust my instincts. Please, let me run these tests." Jared hesitated, his fists clenching and unclenching. Finally, he nodded. "Do it." The next few hours were agonizing. The family waited in the clinic's lobby, their emotions swinging wildly between hope and despair. Monica paced back and forth, her hands wringing nervously. Jared sat with his head in his hands, his mind racing with possibilities. Ava sat quietly, hugging Max's favorite toy, a stuffed bunny, against her chest. Finally, Dr. Wilson emerged, his expression a mixture of relief and excitement. "I have good news," he said. "Max doesn't have a degenerative disease after all. He has a rare autoimmune disorder that mimics many of the same symptoms. The best part, it's treatable." Monica let out a sob of relief, her hands flying to her mouth. Jared stood abruptly, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Treatable?" he repeated. "Yes," Dr. Wilson confirmed. "With the right medication, a specialized diet, and consistent care, Max has a strong chance of recovering." Ava jumped to her feet, her face lighting up. "Max is going to be okay?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. Dr. Wilson smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, Max is going to be okay." Monica threw her arms around Jared, both of them crying openly now. Ava ran to Max, hugging him tightly. "You're staying, Max," she said. "You're not going anywhere." Max's tail wagged vigorously as if he understood every word. The weeks that followed were challenging but filled with hope. The family threw themselves into Max's recovery, each playing a vital role in his care. Monica researched everything she could about his condition, joining online support groups and consulting with specialists. Jared took charge of Max's meals, preparing them with meticulous care. Ava became Max's personal cheerleader, encouraging him during his exercises and celebrating every small victory. Slowly but surely, Max began to improve. His appetite returned, his energy levels increased, and his coat regained its golden sheen. The spark in his eyes that had been dimmed for so long now shone brightly. One day, as the family played in the backyard, Max surprised everyone by running to fetch a ball, a task he hadn't been able to do in months. Ava let out a delighted squeal, clapping her hands. "See, Max? I told you you're a superhero." The Bennetts watched in awe as Max bounded across the yard, his tail wagging furiously. In that moment, their hearts swelled with gratitude. They had been given a second chance, and they would never take it for granted. Years later, as Ava looked through a scrapbook filled with photos of Max, she smiled. "Max isn't just my best friend," she said. "He's our miracle." And indeed he was.